So good morning. We're here with Ann Thompson-Frenk, and we've been here together for the UK Club of Budapest launch. And Ann, you've shared some of the work that you've been doing with your foundation. And I'm very interested in what your original inspiration for the work that you're doing has come from.
Well, thank you. Well, the work from the Memnosyne Institute really has come from a lot of different places, but one of the most profound ones is a place located outside of Cuernavaca, Mexico, called Xochicalco. And what it is it's a place, pyramids, but they have a pyramid for science, they have a pyramid for arts, a pyramid for health and medicine, every area of knowledge. And this place was very sacred to the Native Americans a long time ago because what they have found are traces that show that people came from as far away as Alaska or as far south as Argentina on foot. And they would come wearing a particular symbol. They theorized it was a butterfly because there was a butterfly that was as big as this couch in front of me, huge. But people would wear this, and when they wore it going from city to city, town to town, it didn't matter if there was war going on between the tribes. They would say, oh, this is a person that is not involved in the politics of the day. This is a person who's making a trek on foot in order to share their knowledge for the benefit of humanity. And when I saw this place, it just blew my mind that really all the Americas, North, South, Central America, half the world had been able to do this in the past without any of our technology, without any of our, things that we have today, and yet they made beautiful monuments just for the purpose of sharing that. And the technology was so advanced for their time. They had hot and cold running water. They had, I don't know if you ever made the experiment of doing like a little camera with cardboard with a pin here. They had a version of that where it was in a cave and it's about this big and deep and through the rock. And they could put their hands, and you can still do it to this day, and the shadows show the skull and the bones, whatever part of you put in there. So they diagnosed like an X-ray. So these are the things that people were doing, and it just blew my mind that this is what happens when humanity can come together. And if you look at the pyramids, you'll see multiple cultures having their architecture blending on the same pyramid. So it shows this beautiful experiment of humanity coming together for that purpose. And I thought, if they could do it without what we have, why can't we do that again?
How interesting. So you had shared with us that you were in fact adopted.
Yes.
So your ethnic or cultural origins was from that region?
Yes, I was adopted when I was 5 days old. And as a young child, I had a lot of what I guess you would say visions, dreams, and thankfully I had a father who, sorry, so sorry about that, but I'll start that again. Yes, as a young child, I had a lot of dreams and visions, and thankfully I had a father who didn't say, oh, that's insane. Instead, he said, let's talk about that. And he would say, pray on it. And he was very Gnostic Catholic, was his tradition. And one day, he, as I kept having these from the time I was 5 years old to I was 25, he said, you know what, just pray on it. And the next day, I woke up, and I had a business partner who was banging on the door, and they were at our family has a vacation home. He said, you have to come see this place. I asked the people here to take me somewhere nearby, somewhere no one thinks about going, and you have to come see it. Well, in the dream, I had a vision of a place for science and health and medicine, all these different things. And the weird thing is the difference between that dream and all the other dreams I'd had since I was 5 was there's this little boy playing with a paper boat and a barrel of water. And I woke up thinking, well, strange. And here's my business partner going, you have to come here. And I said, what? And he said, there's this pyramid for science, for art, for medicine. And I'm just going, wait a minute. And he goes, and I don't know why I'm telling you this because it's the most insignificant part of it. There was this little boy playing with a paper boat and a barrel of water. And I went, oh. And, my father had said the night before, pray on this. And so I really took that as a direct answer. And when I saw that, it was, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do in the world.
It's very interesting that you share this story. We've done a series of interviews with many of the people that have been here. And every single one of the people that we spoke with has had a nonlinear, a dream, a non-rational experience that led them into the path of the work that they're doing now.
Absolutely. And it's spoken about in so many languages, because of this. My father used to take me, to Sunday school, and I enjoyed it very much. But what I didn't know is that in the Catholic tradition, there are things that priests and nuns know to look for. If a young girl is doing it, she's going to be a nun. If a little boy is doing it, he'll be a priest one day. And they don't share it with the people. They wait and see what the signs are because they don't want family telling them, go do this. But apparently, according to my mother, she shared with me my family was very Catholic, and I would go to Sunday school. And what we didn't realize is that the nuns and the priests have things they look for. And if a young girl is doing them, it means she's going to be a nun. If a little boy is doing them, he's going to be a priest. And they don't share it with everyday people because they don't want someone trying to get their kids to do it. And apparently, according to my mother, she shared with me only a few years ago, that the priest called my parents in and said, we have a problem. Your little girl is doing the things that say she's going to be a priest. And we don't have a place for that, so you need to figure something else out. And, you know, for the Catholic Church to say that. And my father at the time, he had an international corporation, and he would bring people on retreats to what we called Casa Thompson, our family place. And one of the things he would do is he would take them to different locations, and one was Teotihuacan. And he met with a man by the name of Ricardo Cervantes. His full name is Salois Kempentecutli. And he's the spiritual leader of the Tolteca people of Teotihuacan. And he asked him, will you advise me on what I should do to help my daughter, because she's doing this? And so I didn't realize that for, you know, just years, he was also getting informed by this man. And later, after my father passed away, I was taking my husband down to Teotihuacan. And I had met Ricardo one time, and there's a very long, involved, beautiful story on that. But I was determined to find Ricardo because we had shared this special moment. And Joshua, came with me, and we found this man, and he said, "Are you this man?" And he said, "I'm not going to claim to be the person that's been advising because I don't want to claim to be someone I might not be, and it's been a long time." But we went down and we did ceremony, and as we went into this alternative state of mind, we saw what had been in the past, and it was this beautiful thing of seeing how this place had been animated. But then in the middle of the vision, suddenly we saw my father laughing so hard, tears are pouring from his eyes. And we're all like, what is this? So we come out of it, and Ricardo looks at me and goes, "What was that?" And I said, "I don't know what he found so funny." Well, we found out later that obviously he had been the person that had been advising. So he's now become a very deep spiritual mentor for me.
So do you have a sense right now, we're at this very specific point in the history of humanity. We seem to be on the verge of a shift in consciousness.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of having come to this time?
Oh, yes.
For specific purpose?
I absolutely believe that there are those of us who signed up to be here in this moment. Because right now humanity has more power than ever before to make it hell on earth or to make it a utopia. What we do right now and how we use our resources and how we interact with each other economically, how we affect each other's environment, how we interact with each other sociologically, all these things is the perfect testing ground. And what we do in terms of how we interconnect, if we do it consciously, we can create an amazing future. If we do it unconsciously, then that's where we get in trouble. So yes, absolutely. I believe that many of us came to here, this place and time. The Tolteca calls it the Zohon, which is very like the Akashic record or the noosphere. The idea that there is a shared consciousness, and what every single one of us puts out into it is something we have to take personal responsibility for, because we are actually co-creating with each other. And that the results of that are magnified almost tenfold than what they used to be.
So I have a question for you in terms of the work that you're doing. You're sitting on the side of the table where you have the resources to fund some of this work that's happening in the consciousness movement. And how do you gauge and decide where to put your resources in this movement, which is worldwide? Well, my husband and I, we have what we call social acupuncture. And what we mean by that is just like there are points on the body that have a resounding beneficial effect, we look for that. And if you were to look at an image, it literally looks like a spider web. And we map out where are all these different areas and how are they going to interconnect. And when we find a place that has multiple interconnections, then we go, that's a place where it's going to have a resonating effect. And are you aware of a concept called synchronic lines? In the community that I come from, we've mapped what are known as synchronic lines. The synchronic lines are the channels of energy on which thought travels dreams travel, we incarnate and disincarnate. So if you were to look at all of the cathedrals on the planet, they're all located on synchronic lines. So I think it would be very interesting to look at your social acupuncture map and understand how that relates to this map. Because things that are done on those points have a resonance across the planet. And it's very likely that intuitively you're also finding those.
I think so. There's multiple opportunities, and what we look at is, if you think of a dartboard, what we call is like you have the center, which is the Akashic, the spiritual thing. Out of that, you have the intellectual. Out of that, you have where, it's the pragmatic. And what we realize is that we're motivated, many of us in this mindset, from looking and measuring value from the inside out. But the general large gist of humanity is going to measure value from the outside in. But you have to keep both of those in mind constantly, because if you only do it from one direction, it's not going to be sustainable and it's not going to have the impact you want.
Has your family's business, so your family, your great-grandfather or great-grandfather started the 7-Eleven?
My grandfather.
And has that business from the beginning been a socially conscious business?
Yes, my 7-Eleven was always part of having, I think, a socially conscious aspect to it. My grandfather, was so instrumental in helping to fight, the Ku Klux Klan and fight for desegregation. And he understood how his business could be an instrument in that. He was put in charge of what was called Negro Day at the Texas State Fair. And in the process, what that meant was he ended up working with people who were African American. And so since he worked with them, they became his friends. So after the fair, he'd say, well, come work for me. And so that, that happened. And over time, he started saying, this is ridiculous. And he tried to make the argument that if you integrated, there'd be more money made. And eventually he won that argument. But in the process leading up to it, there were decades of more than harassment, of their lives being threatened. And I would hear stories from, my uncles and my dad about how in the middle of the night they'd be woken up and my grandmother would say, it's reading time. It'd be 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. They thought, this woman is nuts. But what she was doing is she was trying to get all the children to the back of the house, and she'd have her little book. But what she was really trying to do is if she got the signal from her husband, she had to sneak him out the back and run for their lives. And meanwhile, my grandfather would be out in front trying to get them to change. Now, he fought head on with the Klan that way, but the other way that he fought was by integrating in his workforce. And so over time, they were able to see how that changed things. And then my father, John Philip Thompson, fought with him to make profit sharing legal. It used to be illegal in the United States. And they were called socialists and communists, as if those are the same thing, for trying to make sure that the profits would be a benefit for all. So now there's a man who's about in his 80s, and he's a multi-millionaire many times over, and he was a janitor in the first 7-Eleven. And because he was invested, he's now sent 5 children to all get their doctorates. And if you meet him, he's still being a janitor, and if you ask him why, he says, this is how I made an honest living, I'm going to keep doing it. But it's amazing to see how the lives change and how we can't demonize economics. I like to tell people economics are like a hammer. I can kill someone with it, or I can build something with it. So use economic. I'm so sorry. I like to tell people economics are like a hammer. You can kill someone with it or you can build something with it. So our economic system is something we need to harness and not look at humanitarianism as just philanthropy, but how can I invest my money? How can I, whether it's conscious capitalism or social responsible investing, use both hands.
And do you find that you have colleagues in the business world around this? And do you find there's a shift happening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I belong to a group that's called Nexus, and we have about 3,000 members, and they're all people who are under 40. They're humanitarians. They are doing work in both conscious capitalism, social responsible investing, and philanthropy, and most of them do both. And the idea is people, planet, profit. And what I found, and I'm among the oldest in the group because I've been there for a while now, but I'm 39, and the younger you go, the more is just natural to them. It just is pragmatic to them. People, planet, profit, you have to measure by all three. And the concept of only looking at profit is something that they just don't even comprehend. And I think part of it is you have a whole generation that has had access to the internet. So globalization is all they've known. So to them, the idea of not measuring for that just isn't something they would want to pursue.
So you're looking now at generations of heirs and heiresses who have this global access.
And a lot of them are self-made. A lot of them have made their millions in their 20s. So it's a mixture of all of that. But many of them, they're looking at how do we change this, and some of it is it's a real hard thing in terms of intergenerational dialogue. I met a young man who's inheriting the largest oil company in Russia, and he said he understood all the environmental thing. He wanted to change things, but his grandfather was staunch, and he said, I'm not ignorant, Marianne. I know that my family got this by being in a mafia type situation. How do I change that? And I said, well, you can't change someone's values. You have to go in and say to them, okay, what is their value? Well, he wants to maintain the family legacy, their power for centuries to come. What does he know? He knows oil is a limited commodity. So you need to go to him and say, if you want to maintain this, we have to change into an energy business and not be an oil business. And then they did that. And he was able to win his grandfather over for this long-term means of changing it over to a more eco-responsible company. But he had to do it based on what the values were of that man. And so I think that for a lot of the younger generation, we're having to look at our elders, be they the baby boomer generation or older than that, and say, what are their motivations? And how do we move in the direction to help the world be what we want it to be, but do it in a way that matches what they're saying their values are?
So you've just spoken about your grandfather and your father both essentially leaving legacies.
Yes.
So now you're a generation who has more resource and access than their generations. Do you feel an even greater sense of responsibility?
Absolutely. I think that right now there is no excuse for ignorance in the world. We can go online and find anything out about anything that we're making an impact on. Do I buy from here? Do I not? Whatever it is we do, our investments, our choices, we have that impact. And if we choose not to do it, it's because we're choosing ignorance. And that's a huge burden of responsibility. But it can also be an exciting opportunity to say, how am I intentionally going to influence this? And I've witnessed, people in my generation who have caused, uprisings, who have caused changes, just by using social media. People who have intentionally invested in one direction or another. There's some people who, were trying to fight for human rights in the Hong Kong area, and they're some of the, wealthiest people in China, and they have to do it quietly and secretly and play one role here and do another role there. So many of us are wearing different hats. But I think that the intention is to try and make it a world that's going to, first of all, be here. Second of all, be here with a quality of life that we want to pass on, if not improve.
Do you have a sense of the importance of community in this transition that we're in?
Absolutely. What I would love to see more of is intergenerational collaboration. I do a whole lot of work of trying to get people who are, and many of them are in their 70s or 80s, working with people that are in their 20s. And a lot of it is because some of the visionaries like Ervin, Laszlo, Don Beck, Barbara Marx Hubbard, the technology is just now catching up to them. They've known this is going to be happening. They've been, the canary in the coal mine saying, this is coming, and now it's here. And so a lot of these young people are reinventing the wheel, not knowing that there's some work that has already been done. And we can go a lot faster if we have those conversations. And sadly, media right now for the younger generation, when you turn the news on, you mostly see people in the baby boomer age and older saying, hate this person because of their sexual orientation, hate this person because of their religion. It's like hate, 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 hate. And it's really isolated that younger generation, their 20s and 30s, from going, I can't relate to that. And unfortunately, the media makes that voice the loudest. So, I think there has to be an intent to try and link our elders that don't agree with those things with the younger generations that don't resonate with that. And that's the kind of community building we need to do if we want humanity to move forward.
And you've brought Don Beck into you're working with him and
Barbara and Ervin. We do a lot of work with all.
They're creating a language of transition
Yes.
for these generations now.
Yes, we've taken all three of their works, Ervin's and Barbara's and Don's, and what I told my husband, who does a lot of documentary work, I want you to MTVize it. And I know that I was asking for a lot because I said, make social responsible investing sexy. But it had to be fast, it had to be animated, you had to have the techno behind it. But what it did is these young minds, they went, That's the language. It's like they knew these things, they didn't have the vocabulary. And that's what, having the vocabulary is amazingly empowering. And I think that there are many people in that age that if we can share that vocabulary, they're also going to have the benefit of witnessing their own aspirations in their own lifetime. I think Ervin and Barbara don't have the potential to witness that if they can be received from younger generations.
Do you feel there are containers to carry? I mean, we're looking at our aging elders, and we're going to be left with the torch to carry on their work. Do you feel that there are dense enough containers right now to continue their work?
I think that there are many people who have taken the work as all science, and a lot of what they do is sociologically based, which is a science, and they've interpreted it in different directions. And that's good. That's how things evolve. But I think that what's also important is that there needs to be a very direct effort to not be interpreting, but to take it as they understand it while they are alive. Apply the technology that's available and do it while they're alive, so then they can give us feedback and say, that's not what I meant. Because we're only going to benefit from that genius. They are geniuses. And I mean that by two different ways. One, yes, the IQ, but the other, the ancient interpretation of genius in receiving the spirit within. They are very open to that. They understand that, and they connect with that at the deepest level. And we will have that in younger generations, but it may take us decades to identify who those people are. So how can we right now make sure that we as a species are keeping up with the pace at which we are evolving if we don't take those that we've identified and help them to articulate it in ways that they see it and they want to see it done?
Do you also have an eye for who the next generation of visionaries are? I
feel like I know a few of them, yes. Yeah. One, his name is Kunal Sood. He's a remarkable person. He has 5 doctorates and just finished, 5 master's degrees, is finishing up a doctorate. But there are people that have an integral approach, in my opinion. I don't think that anyone who is approaching life without an integral approach is going to have something that's going to be accurate to represent the world that we're in. Because right now we still teach things in silos, but the reality is you can't talk about the environment without discussing economics. And you can't discuss economics without discussing human rights. And you can't discuss human rights without human diversity. Before you know it, you've gone around to every subject in the book. And there are many times where I've taken a ball of yarn and I'll go in a room and I'll throw it and say, who's here for this? And they raise their hand for it. And before you know it, and I give them that link of environment, economics, and rights, and I ask them to lift it up, and there's a web. And they're all shocked. And I said, now raise your hand if you're connected to someone with a topic that you thought had nothing to do with what you're passionate about. And every hand goes up. And that's the world we're inheriting. We can't segment what we do from one to the other. So if we're going to be able to create solutions that are sustainable, we have to do it with that understanding. So I think right now, the integral philosophy, which has long been a philosophy, has to become action. And that's what's, the alchemy waiting right now for all of us to do.
So if you were to look 10 years in the future, what do you see, what do you see your work being at that point?
I have what I hope it can be. Right now, the projects that, we have in the Memnosyne Institute, we have 3 layers. We call our Campus Without Walls, which are all of our programs worldwide. We have an international chapter in Kyoto, one in Israel, Palestine. We have cultural centers in the Yucatan, Teotihuacan, and then we have programs that we've done throughout Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas. Then, of course, we have our local programs where we are in Dallas, Texas. So all of that are our programs. Then we have what we call our virtual campus. And that's something which occurred because we realized, Joshua, my husband, and I realized we were so often the people making connections, introductions between people. And we realized that that wasn't happening fast enough. So we created globalcollaborationsource.org, which was basically focused on taking all the technology that already exists, this online dating technology of tall and blonde, but instead say, I want to do social responsible investing in Zimbabwe. with this particular thing. And we realized all this existed, it just hadn't been reappropriated for this use. And so now we have that running, and that is connecting people with the Club of Budapest, Centers for Human Emergence, Foundation for Conscious Evolution, any groups that are really looking at things integrally and trying to connect them so that they can find who their natural collaborators should be. And the third thing that we're doing is the physical campus, and that's what we're building in Dallas. And it's being designed by architect Keith Critchlow. He's already done 2 different buildings. He's the leading sacred geometrist in the world. One of the things that we have in there is this collaboration with the Vital Signs Monitor and Wheel of Co-Creation that we're doing with Barbara Marx Hubbard. However, the building itself is, because it's based on that Fibonacci sequence, it is what we would like to say is basically a lesson in stone. Yeah. And then what we have on the bottom layer, we have things by Nassim Haramein that show the same pattern in quantum physics. We have a lot of Keith Critchlow's own work, which shows these patterns in biology. And then one of the most stunning things with Don Beck's work, with the Vital Signs Monitor, they've been able to show with neurologists that what he has tracked and Claire Graves tracked wasn't just a pattern that was made up to interpret things. It's actually a pattern, provable pattern in the neuroscience of how we think. So what they're realizing is that the human species, not only individually, but shared consciousness follows that same Fibonacci pattern and sequence. So when people go into the building, they'll be able to see how this relates to them at the atomic level, with quantum physics, how it exists in space, how it exists in the physical world, and how it exists in their consciousness.
So you've created an initiation path through the building that's your center.
Yes, that's the hope. And what we're trying to do, it doesn't have, there's going to be 7 buildings. They all have different areas. So that's modeled after Teotihuacan. We have an area for arts, sciences, health, medicine, technology, all these different groups. An interfaith building, separate, but that's separate from one on spirituality and one that we have on Center for Outreach. And the Center for Outreach is where the Vital Signs Monitor Wheel of Co-Creation will be.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up, because that brings it back around to your original vision. So I really appreciate your taking the time to sit down and speak with us.
Sure. Thank you.